How's everybody doing today, this morning? It's early. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. I'm Dave Kennedy. We'll get going. But anyways, I literally went drinking last night. But welcome to an AA meeting. This talk's going to be basically about security, and I formed it in the structure of an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And the reason I did that is, and I'll get into this in a little bit, but in security, I think we really have a problem. And it's an addiction towards technology and things that don't necessarily work. And the whole talk is framed around basically bypassing all of the different types of technology that are out there that we use every day to protect us. So it's a little bit to talk about, are we getting better, and really showing you if we are or not. There we go. Just a quick introduction. Dave Kennedy. I created the Social Engineer Toolkit, wrote the book, Metasploit, the Penetration Tester's Guide. I'm one of the founders of DerbyCon, and I founded a company called Trusted Sec, which is back in the States in Ohio. So without further ado, let's get started. So anybody ever been to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting? And you don't really have to raise your hand if you have, but you're more than welcome to. An AA meeting in the United States is you have a certain amount of steps that you have to do to get better and admit that you have a problem. So this whole talk is going to be basically formatted around basically breaking everybody down and showing them the different things that there is out there, different types of technology you can bypass. And then from there, we'll start to build you back up on actually how to do security properly. So basically a precursor, if you work for a product company, I apologize. I'm basically going to be ripping pretty much all of you. But it's not in spite. It's just to show you different parts and problems that we have. So first things first, if we look at what we do in security and how we kind of have a problem, and I'm not sure if it's the same here, but typically when you look at companies, they sit there and they invest in a lot of technology. They introduce a lot of new pieces of technology to try to help prevent attackers and hackers from being able to bypass, from stopping you from getting into the organization. And so, the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to break everybody down, and then I'm going to build you back up. So just a quick statistic. If you look at breach statistics, and this is from datalossdb.org, if you look at last year, we had 1,610 breaches, and then this year alone, we're definitely on track for the same amount. So if you look at that percentage-wise, we had a 47% increase in different types of breaches that we had, and different types of attacks that we had from last year, from 2011 to 2012. So we're not getting better when it comes to the amount of breaches that we're seeing, but yet we're seeing spend increasing over and over again. So going into that, does anybody here have a NextGen Firewall, right? Or antivirus, anybody have that? Web application firewalls, behavioral analysis, heuristics, data loss prevention. All of these are typical techniques and technologies that we use every day to try to protect us against different types of attacks. And I'm going to show you how to bypass every one of them today. So NextGen Firewalls are my favorite. NextGen Firewalls kind of tout everything, right? They tout to be behavioral analysis. They tout to have kind of a consortium of tools and technology to stop spam filtering, content filtering, network analysis. All of those are like common things that they tout as far as NextGen Firewalls. Anybody use the NextGen Firewall, had a chance to play with them? A few? Cool. So what's interesting with NextGen Firewalls, and what's funny about them, is they're still using the same type of antiquated technology that we're used to back in the 1990s. Does anybody know how NextGen Firewalls actually do behavioral analysis on the network side of the house? Anybody have any idea? Signatures, right? They're using signatures, the same thing that antivirus uses, the same thing that we've been using for a number of years, and yet that's being touted as kind of the next generation of how we're going to protect against attackers. So I want to show you something I'm going to be releasing at DEF CON this year. And I wrote this, and I was on a pen test that had a NextGen Firewall. A second here. And so if you look at this, and how easy it is to bypass. Now, I'll actually show you how to deploy a piece of malware or compromise a system. Getting code execution on a machine is the easy part. It's getting that information out of the organization, out of that firewall, or egress-wise. That's the challenging part. So I'll show you that in a second. But what this does, and we'll be releasing all the code at DEF CON. And what this does is my backtrack machine is just sitting here listening for a connection. And so the connection itself is a special connection. It's completely unique, and I'll tell you that in a second. And then on my fully patched Windows 8 machine, it's pretty. I'll show you how to get code execution here in a second. But what's going to happen is it's going to inject assembly code straight into memory. It's going to encapsulate it around SSH, and then it's going to tunnel it over HTTP, actually HTTPS. And it's going to chunk it up in a way that's polymorphic in nature, so it completely and dynamically changes every single time. And it doesn't get picked up by anything out there. And I've done these for, I think I've tested them on about 7 different NextGen firewalls getting out. and basically allows you to establish a connection. If you look over here, notice it says polling for connection, polling for connection. Here it identifies the encrypted tunnel. It then launches Metasploit, and we should have a shell. So that right there took about 8 hours to write and get around any type of NextGen firewall, and it works on all of them. And the problem with this one that's going to be difficult to fix for any of them is that there's nothing that you can really write a signature on. It's completely dynamic and changes every single time. It's a different cipher key every single time, and it mutates and it's polymorphic. So there's nothing that you can really write a signature on, and doesn't look abnormal when it comes to the amount of requests that are going back and forth. The only difference is it's a little bit slow. If you notice here, I'm typing fast, and it has a little bit of a lag based on all the encryption that you put on it. So this right here was one of the easy things you can do just to circumvent NextGen firewalls. Makes it super simple and gets around anything that you want out there. So web application firewalls, since I don't have a web application firewall, I can't actually demonstrate it. But web application firewalls are actually probably one of the more difficult ones to break. It takes about an hour to bypass those, depending on which ones you're using. And when I say an hour, there's just a lot of Googling that you have to do to figure out what they're using for encoding and what they check for. And there's a tool out there called WAFWolf that actually goes and it identifies what type of web application firewall is being used. And then from there, if it's an Imperva or something else out there, all you need to do is just look at how they're actually doing the inspection of the attacks, and then you just encode it a certain way to get around it. And there's plenty of bypasses online for pretty much any web application firewall you want to get around. So those are pretty easy. So estimated time to bypass those is about an hour. Now, these next attacks I'm going to show you. So my favorites are behavioral analysis, whitelisting, blacklisting, antivirus, and did I say heuristics? Anyways, whatever, heuristics. So those are my 4 favorite ones, and I'm going to show you how to bypass all those at the exact same time because they're all pretty much related in the same type of technology. But behavioral analysis is an interesting concept because you're supposed to be able to detect certain predefined behaviors of an attacker, right? So, hey, am I doing things a certain way that looks suspicious? Am I doing something that's different and abnormal that shouldn't happen? The problem we run into in behavioral analysis is there's so much code and so many things, so many different applications that are being run every single day, just normal in our environment. It's almost impossible to tell from a behavior standpoint if something's acting malicious or not. And so just as an example, we were doing a incident response, and it was, the company had been compromised for a number of years, and they were just farming all the traffic and all the data out of Google Drive, which looked like legitimate traffic in every way, shape, or form, and they used Google applications for everything, Google business apps, and so they didn't even know. So, looking at behavior, it's really difficult for anything to stop it for the simple fact that nothing really looks abnormal when it comes to different types of attacks. If you looked at like semantic endpoint protections, behavioral analysis side of the house, it's just looking for weird, suspicious network connections, but it doesn't really flag on anything. So I'll show you how to bypass that in a second. Whitelisting, blacklisting. Anybody ever use whitelisting, blacklisting in their organizations? Relatively hard to actually implement large scale, but whitelisting, blacklisting is an interesting concept, and we'll show you how to bypass that in a second too. But whitelisting, blacklisting is an interesting concept because it takes an application that should be whitelisted, that should be allowed, and then it says, I'm not going to allow anything else. Well, that's only for executables, right? What about things that are already whitelisted, like, for example, Internet Explorer, or processes that are already trusted that we can use, that we can manipulate and attack, that are already whitelisted and used. So, and I'll show you one of the awesome ones here in a second for bypassing it, which is PowerShell. But whitelisting, blacklisting is essentially trying to disallow anything from executing that wouldn't necessarily be allowed in its normal process. A real funny one, anybody heard of FireEye? Yeah. So, interesting enough, has anybody ever used the Social Engineer Toolkit before? A couple people? Okay, that's good. Good to see. So, according to FireEye, has anybody ever paid $700 for the Social Engineer Toolkit? No? Okay. So, according to FireEye, they were doing a presentation, and they're talking about the exploit toolkits and what you can use as far as the underground hacking community and the evil hackers are using. And they said for a low price of $700, you can own the Social Engineer Toolkit. Social Engineer Toolkit's obviously open source, it's free, but if anybody's actually paying $700, can you just give it to me? Because I'm not making any money off of it, so it'd be awesome. So, and it just, that was FireEye's, and it's on their presentations. I sent them an email, never got a response back, so I think they're still telling people that it sets $700, so I'd like to see that someday. Antivirus, I really don't think there's much to even talk about on antivirus. You basically get time back trying to defeat antivirus because there's nothing out there that's really stopping signature-based detection. And I'm going to show you all those right now. Now, this is a new version of the Social Engineer Toolkit that's actually getting released today. And what's nice about this attack is anybody here very familiar with PowerShell and how to use PowerShell attacks and things like that? Couple? Good. So back in, I don't know, DEF CON 18, I think it was, I spoke at Black Hat and spoke at DEF CON, and it was when PowerShell 1 first came out. And so we started looking at PowerShell 1, and we're like, hey, this thing's amazing because it basically gives us a full ability to pretty much program anything that we want to on the operating system. And as part of that, we figured out a couple ways of getting around what are called execution restriction policies. And so execution restriction policies per Microsoft, when it was getting released back in, 2009, said, execution restriction policies are a way to prevent, unauthorized access of scripts that may not be signed or may not be, allowed on the operating system. And when we did our talk at DEF CON and Black Hat, the fix that they gave was they changed the wording in it to say execution restriction policies are not a safety zone. So they patched it through the documentation. So it's still available today, the different types of attacks that you can use, and it still allows you to basically run anything that you want to on the operating system itself. So I'm going to show you an example of this. I'm just using the Social Engineer Toolkit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to clone a website. I'll just clone TrustedSec so I don't get sued by anybody. And it's going to clone the website, it's going to pull it back, it's going to rewrite it, it's going to obfuscate everything, it's going to re-encrypt everything, and everything in set is done with AES-256 encryption. So everything from the shellcode that gets deployed to anything that gets dropped on the system is all from end-to-end encrypted with a dynamic cipher key and encrypted with 256 AES every single time, so you can't really see into it. And one of the cool techniques is using a technique called PI injection. And yeah, it's cool. All right, we're good. So what's happening here is the website's loaded, ready to go. Now, obviously, I would do something like create a fake website. So if I'm going in and attacking an organization, the thing that I'm going to do that's simple is I'm going to go to their website. I'll go register a domain name that looks similar to them. I'll purchase that website for $15. I'll buy an SSL cert for $20, and then I'll create a fake website that looks believable in every way, shape, or form. And I'll go and I'll target 1 or 2 or 3 people. And the reason I only target 1 or 2 or 3 people is because as you start growing your volume of people that you're attacking, you have a higher detection rate of getting caught. So I'll only target a few individuals that I want to go after, and I'll wait a little bit, and then maybe I'll send a couple more, like 2 or 3, and then I'll just wait for people to start clicking on links. Now, this attack itself doesn't actually use any type of exploit. So it's using how Java was designed. And actually, what I'm going to do, I think it's already signed, but you can, Java's model of applets, for example, is fundamentally flawed in how it actually deploys them. A Java applet doesn't require any type of sandboxing. It allows you to execute anything you want to in an underlying operating system. It allows you to attack an operating system without having to use any type of exploit whatsoever. And the thing is that the applets themselves are significantly believable, especially when you go and you target individuals. In fact, you can even put in there, click this link that says I'm going to, it's going to harm your computer, and hit run because people will do it. But at the end of the day, the attack is really, really simple and it works really well. Now, this is using, I think actually there's a new version of Java that came out, which seems like it's one every day, so I may get a warning here. But other than that, so go to the website. And it looks like my website in every way, shape, or form. Now, would you guys trust this? I would. Everybody here is like, nah, I'm in security. I wouldn't do that, but they wouldn't in a heartbeat. I did one 2 weeks ago where the guy that hired us, we were sending him the test message to show him, and he actually clicked the link and hit run. So I mean, it's believable in every way, shape, or form, and you can make this say whatever you want to. I could have it say, whatever company I'm targeting. I could have it say TrustedSec. I could have it say whatever. And what's funny is this is a code signing certificate. Okay, so this is a valid code signing cert. Does anybody know the process of getting a code signing cert? You just need a legitimate business. All right. So for $20 or $30, you can register a legitimate business, and then you go and you purchase a code signing cert for about $150 from GoDaddy, and now you have a fully fledged, working, legitimate, believable cert. Now, as soon as I hit run on this, it's not going to deploy any type of binary. It's not going to deploy an executable. It's not going to deploy anything. All it's going to do is it's going to use PowerShell to inject assembly code straight into memory, never touching disk, gets around whitelisting, blacklisting, because PowerShell has to be whitelisted in Windows to actually operate efficiently because it uses things like help menus and updates and things like that. So it'll automatically execute PowerShell on the underlying operating system, shoot our shellcode into memory, and then we'll have full access to the computer. All right? So as soon as someone hits run here, and you notice what happened on the top here? I mean, notice that? It went back to the legitimate site, so the victim never knew that they're at a bad site in the first place. So it makes it look more believable in every way, shape, or form, and they're actually on the website now. And if I go back to here, you can see I have all my shells here. So real easy technique to do, and interesting enough too, like if I don't know if I have UAC on. Yeah, see, another cool technique if you don't know is user access control. Anybody use user access control? So UAC is an interesting one. This is an old exploit that I released back in 2011, but it still works today. So right here I got access is denied, right? Which means that I'm not able to elevate myself to system and get full permission because user access control is stopping me. Now UAC, if you're not familiar, is that little annoying box that pops up and they click yes, pops up, you hit yes. And what that's doing is it's sandboxing you into a small environment where your normal user account, and then it only elevates permissions to administrator when you need it. Now, we found a flaw back in 2011 where basically when you log into a Windows machine, there's processes that are spawned under your user account. And in that type of scenario, those processes don't always prompt you for UAC, do they? Like, do you see export.exe ever triggering and saying, hey, I need administrative level rights? No, right? You don't ever see export.exe ever triggering you for that. So I started looking at, well, why is that? And the processes themselves are actually signed with what's called a trusted publisher certificate, which whitelists it from being able to be triggered by UAC. And so since those processes are being spawned under the context of their user account, we can inject into them and have them call a DLL. That DLL then triggers our executable, and it runs under the context of that process. We now have a UAC safe shell. And there's a module and Metasploit for it. And I can just run it real quick. Actually, hang on. And it's been a little bit buggy lately. I've been doing some work on it. So hopefully it does work. We'll see. Yep, it did. So now if I run git system, voila. So you're able to escalate around UAC and get around it in a type of manner. And that works on a fully patched Windows 8 machine that still hasn't been fixed. And the reason being is it's a flaw in how UAC was designed. So they actually have to re-architect and redesign everything about UAC in order to fix it. So it works on anything that you want to, Windows 7, Windows Vista, and Windows 8 fully patched, no problems there at all. Now, what's interesting about that PowerShell attack is there's no way that I know of today of detecting that. Reason being is you're not touching disk ever, right? You're just running a PowerShell command, you're spawning a PowerShell process, and then from there you're injecting into memory. And I want to show you what that looks like. I released a tool just the other day, and this is actually included into the new version of SET. And actually, the new version of SET has something really neat in it. So when you're injecting into memory, if you're running on a 64-bit platform, typically you'd have to inject 64-bit shellcode, right? Or if you're on an x86, you'd have to inject 32-bit shellcode. So what I ended up doing in the new version of SET, which is now it'll be committed today, is I figured out a way of doing what's called a process downgrade attack, which basically what I do is when I'm going and injecting the shellcode, I detect whether or not it's a 64 or 32-bit system. And if it's a 64-bit operating system, it automatically downgrades the process to a 32-bit process, and we can just inject x86 shellcode all day long on a 64-bit processor. So it allows us to inject in any type of system that we want to and not have to worry about whether or not it's 64 or 32-bit. So it's much more efficient, and it's actually a lot leaner. I'm going to show you what it looks like. And what's nice about this is, has anybody been in a pen test before where you're using like PSExec and Metasploit and it gets picked up by antivirus, or you're going and you find SQL injection and you spawn an XP command shell store procedure, and then you're trying to inject into that and you have to figure out a way to deploy a binary and stuff like that into it. Anybody run into those type of situations before? So with this attack, it makes it a lot easier. Let me show you what it looks like. And this is a tool called Magic Unicorn that I wrote. It's got a unicorn right there. So what I'm going to do, and it's just simple syntax. You run Unicorn. You get whatever payload you want to in Metasploit, what port you're going to come back on. And again, this is going to be reverse, right? So it's going to originate from the person's computer, send it out to us via egress filtering, and it's going to hit it. Now, this is going to generate everything for us. So it exports two files. One is the actual PowerShell attack that you're going to copy and paste. And the second is an RC file to run the Metasploit console, okay? So let me just open this up real quick. I'm going to open up two windows here. And I'm going to run the RC file. And all I'm going to do is open up this command. And this is the command that gets executed on the machine itself. And if you notice down there, and this is how we're able to bypass execution restriction policies, is Microsoft put their own backdoor into PowerShell, which is what we call encoded command. And all encoded command is you just have to chop your entire PowerShell script, code, and it looks something like this. I can actually show you real quick. So if you look here, here's our actual PowerShell code. And if you look at this, it's just PowerShell syntax. And all we're doing, and this is Matthew Graber's attack here, is we're just injecting into a process, allocating the memory, right? And then we're executing the shell code, and that's it. So this is the PowerShell syntax here that we're using. And all we do to get around execution restriction policies, even in its most restricted form, is we just take all that PowerShell code, we cast it Unicode, and then we convert it to base 64. And then we pass the base 64 blob of data through a PowerShell command, and then that executes on the system itself. We don't have to worry about execution restriction policy. So it allows you to circumvent it. There's a lot of other ways of doing it too, but this one's just the most efficient. So we see here, this code here is just Unicode and base 64. That's all it is. And then when we actually run this on the operating system, this stands for no profile, window styles hidden, non-interactive, so it doesn't pop up on the window. And then this is the encoded command. This is all abbreviated and shortened because we need to keep it as small as possible so that we can still execute our commands on the operating system command line. So when we copy this and highlight it, if you notice here, we had no shells, right? As soon as we paste it in over here, and hit enter. Give it a second. It's running real slow. Real slow. All right, hang on a second. Do this one more time here. Sure.
How do you get them to run the paste the code on their machine?
How do you get to paste the code on the machine?
Yeah.
I'll show you in a second. It automatically happens in set. Set automatically does all the PowerShell stuff for you, like behind the scenes. So like the Java app will actually detect whether or not PowerShell is installed on the machine, and if it's installed, it'll inject shell code. Otherwise, if PowerShell isn't installed, it'll fall back to dropping a binary on the machine itself. So it does multiple methods of trying to infect it. But I'll show you another way too, which is nice. Oh, I had one earlier, it just kinked out. Here we go. I should have another one here in just a second. There it is. So we get our Metriper shell just by copying and pasting that code in there. Now, how do you get that type of execution? Well, there's a few different examples. So in a pen test, a lot of times, anybody ever compromise one machine and then you use the credentials for one machine on the rest of them? There's actually a cool, neat trick in Metasploit, if you don't know. It's called psexec command. That's right. And psexec command, what's nice with it is you just give it a command line to run, and then you give it the credentials, and it'll automatically go in and run through all your systems. So like, and it supports R hosts, so you can scan multiple CIDR ranges and actually have it execute on all the systems that you want to. So you just look at somewhere here. Bless you. So psexec command here, you just use that and run it against systems that you need to. But there's a lot of cool tricks that you can use with this. Just a super simple way of getting around it. And deploying these type of things are extremely simple, especially when it comes to set. All of this gets around antivirus, the new version, especially the new version of set, I think from version 5 and above. So a funny story, so for the longest time, antivirus vendors were just trying to download my binaries and then write signatures for it. So I moved away from binaries completely just because they were just writing signatures for my stuff. And then what happened is they started going after my Java applet and flagging my Java applet as being malicious. So and it was funny because every time I do a new release of set, I could see all the IP spaces from all the antivirus companies hitting my websites to write signatures for it. So that made me kind of mad. So what I did is I spent about 2 months writing a polymorphic Java applet that gets uploaded to GitHub every 2 hours. And so every single time it gets uploaded, it's completely dynamic, completely changed in every single way, shape, or form. All the strings are encrypted. The entire applet itself is encrypted, different every 2 hours. And they lasted about 19 times and they finally gave up. So the applet itself never gets picked up by antivirus anymore, which is a good thing. Crazy guys. So antivirus, behavioral, whitelisting, blacklisting. Heuristics is another interesting one. I guess it's kind of in the same lines as behavioral, but it looks for predefined patterns that attackers use. Good concept, but not ever implemented in any way, shape, or form in any of the type of tools that we see. DLP, it's the same as antivirus. Getting around that's pretty easy. Content filtering is an interesting one. So content filtering, and we'll be releasing this at DEF CON as well. Let me see where it's at here. Let's see, where's it at? Yeah, here it is. So this is a, what this does is it takes any type of blob, and I just used hex because it was a simple format. But the content filtering tries to stop you and prevent you from using like executables, right? So you can't download EXEs. All this does is use PowerShell to grab a hex blob, download it, and then convert it back to a binary for you. So a real simple concept, but just easy ways of getting around content filtering. So a lot of cool stuff out there that makes it super easy to do. Oh, that's the email from FireEye, by the way, that I sent to him. He never responded back, so I just said, hey, you should probably stop saying that I sell a set for $700. Anyways. Monitoring detection. So another one that's kind of our preventative measures. And my favorite ones are MSSPs. I like picking on MSSPs because they basically do nothing and they get a ton of money for it. So MSSPs are a way of outsourcing all of your security and your monitoring detection to a company that's supposed to be monitoring, right? And a lot of times all they're doing is looking at predefined canned things. Like, hey, is someone running a Nessus on our environment? Is someone running blatant scans on our environment? And a lot of times they don't even detect those, which is horrible. A lot of times they're like simple things that they miss. Like, a flagship thing that an attacker does when they get access to your environment is add a domain admin, right? Well, it's funny because from the conversion from 2003 to 2008, the event IDs change for adding a domain admin to a privileged group, and no one ever checks that. So if you just add a domain admin to a server 2008, in most cases it'll never flag on any type of monitoring that you have out there, which is nice. But monitoring detection, its concept is good and it's supposed to help. But the problem is we try to outsource the majority of it to other vendors or experts that claim to do something, and a lot of times they don't actually detect it. Now, a lot of other companies that have monitoring detection only maybe have like a half a person dedicated to it, and all they're looking at is alerts that are pre-canned inside of these tools, right? And a lot of times we don't ever trigger any of those. Like, I'm not going to sit there and I'm not going to run Nessus against your environment. It's just too noisy and too loud. I'm going to sit there, I'm going to attack you through a web application, or I'm going to attack you through social engineering, and you're never going to see it. So these things don't typically work as well. So I showed a lot of different technologies, right? Did I miss any of them, by the way? Did I miss any technologies? I tried to bundle them all up. Did I miss one or two? I can show you real quick on how to bypass them if we need to. Did I hear them? Okay, all right. So very easy as far as an attacker is concerned of getting around those. And the thing that's interesting about these attacks is they're not anything really different than what I was doing 10 years ago. I mean, we're still breaking in with the same type of things, aren't we? I mean, if you look at the type of breaches that we're experiencing, the type of attacks that we're seeing, it's the same stuff. We're talking about buffer overflows. We're talking about SQL injection. We're talking about, not securing web applications properly. It's the same stuff that's been around for 10 years. And yet the technology's, attempted to progress in a way that stops those types of attacks, but they still fall extremely short of being able to protect it. So, first things first, technology isn't working. At least not for me, when we come in and we rip into companies that have all these pieces of technology, even if it's implemented properly. So step one. Step two, does anybody know the definition of insanity by any chance? Anybody know, what's the definition of insanity?
Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
So doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. I'd like to call that InfoSec. And so I think we should change the dictionary to InfoSec because we continue to do the same exact thing over and over again, expecting some different results. So whether it's, putting signature analysis inside NextGen Firewalls, or whether it's using DLP that's supposed to stop leakage, which, does anybody here have an information classification program that actually targets critical data and that you monitor extremely heavy? That'd be cool, but we can still tunnel all that over encrypted traffic, right? So none of that gets seen, none of it gets detected. And so a lot of these type of attacks aren't sophisticated in nature, and we're still using the same thing. So either we can continue to keep going the same way that we're going, or we have to change something fundamentally and do something fundamentally different in order to get better. And so we can either go this way, which is the same, or this way, which is completely different and just crazy talk, right? So if you want to keep doing the same thing, you can just leave the rest of the talk because the rest of it's for the folks that want to change and admit that they have a problem. But if you want to leave, it's cool. Appreciate your time. Cool, everybody's still here. That's awesome. Sweet. So what we need to do is actually, in security, is actually get our hands dirty. And this is the worst thing for us, especially being nerds. Like, and at least I'm a nerd. I don't know if you guys are or not, but being nerds and being someone that's kind of an introvert, talking to people, working with the organization, doing things that actually require us to actually lift our hands and do things, are things that we don't typically do in InfoSec. We expect a piece of technology that we put into place to work for us, and that's kind of it. So instead of the 12-step program in an AA meeting, I'm going to go to the 5-step program. I've simplified it and made it easier. So these 5 steps are things that you can do to make your security program better over a significant or short period of time and help you out. So first step, and this is the first thing that anybody should do in any type of organization, period, especially when you first get there, it's the best, is change the culture. I look at when you go into an organization, what do you have employee orientation? Teaches you about the company, right? What you have to do, how it works, all that good stuff. Do you know how to submit an expense in your company? Do you know how to contact HR if you have a problem, or how you contact somebody for medical benefits? Security is no different. What do we do in case if I identify a security issue? Who do I contact? Who do I go to? Just simple things like that. But at the end of the day, fixing an organization takes a lot of work, and it requires people to be overly communicated about what you're doing. And the reason being is, in most cases, in a lot of companies that I go into, and a lot of companies that I see, securities look like that one that just continues to rub every business the wrong way, right? It's the ones that make everything stop. It's the ones that stop our production, that stop our business. So a lot of times it's a combative nature versus one that's actually trying to help. So, a lot of times I hear security as the big brother, they're monitoring us, things like that. Well, prior to me starting my own company, I was a chief security officer of a Fortune 1000 company. So we were, $8 billion, 22,000 employees, international. We were in over 77 countries. And what I did, the first thing I did when I was there is I sat there and I just started talking to people and letting them know what we're doing. Everything from just educating them in certain things, telling them certain strategies that we're doing. All of those just really helped my cause when I was trying to implement things. And I was doing stupid stuff like, so I was a CSO of a Fortune 1000 company. I was sitting there at 2 o'clock in the morning helping someone fix their PC at home. Just stuff like that makes a huge difference to people. And guess what? That person that you fix that computer for will do anything you want them to from here on out because you helped them out. And so that's the thing, letting that branch, because we are gifted in security. We know security really well using that. Education awareness is vital. I mean, being able to communicate to people and train them on certain things to look for. And this is where there's a couple of fundamental flaws in a lot of, I think, thinking in the industry. Dave Attell came out, I think, about 2 years ago and said that education awareness is completely useless. It doesn't provide any value and that we shouldn't use it. Bruce Schneider said the same thing about 6 months ago or 3 months ago or 4 months ago, that teaching individuals about education awareness is useless and you should do it through attrition or making things easier. I've seen education awareness work in companies, and it absolutely does work. I mean, I'd rather have 22,000 sensors in my company where it just takes one of them to say, hey, I saw this is strange, for me to be able to go out and investigate it, find out what's going on, to actually go and remediate that issue. And that's the only real defense that we have against these type of attacks, because these type of attacks leverage our individuals, leverage people. They're the worst kind that you can possibly imagine. And it's the same stuff that we were doing back in the 90s, in the 80s. It's just, it's just evolved a little bit on the technology side. So we have to have education awareness for people to be able to do things. And it shouldn't be complex. I mean, our education awareness, when we say education awareness, what do we automatically think of in our company? Anybody know? What's our education awareness program in every company? An online, an online instruction set, like, hey, here's spear phishing, next. Here's this, next. Has anybody actually ever read through those? I haven't. I was a CSO of a Fortune 1000 company, and my own education awareness stuff, I'm like, next, 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 next. It's a pain. No one wants to listen to that. And especially if it's like an hour. Like, I'm not gonna sit there through an hour and learn about spear phishing when I have no idea what that is. So it has to be a little bit different and tailored towards people of actually resonating with them. So keeping them up to date, frequently, reminding them, stuff like that. Making security your friend, right? Not the naysayers, not the pain, not a business process slowdown, just ones that actually go out and help you. Those are the type of things that we're talking about, and those are the type of things that help. At the end of the day, when you're talking about making security your friend, you should be the ones that are helping the business and making it more of a business enhancement, not anything else. And, once you actually start doing this, your company actually, starts to change a little bit in a way that makes things better. Like IT becomes better. Everything becomes better. Step 2, and this is the crazy one for a lot of people, but it's called the 1-year challenge. I'm 2 years sober on this one, so I can tell you I can do it. The 1-year challenge is do not buy one product for an entire year. Not one. Just not one. I mean, maybe you can still renew what you currently have. I'll let that slide. But don't buy one product, not one. And why did I say that is focus on the basic stuff. The basic stuff is what's killing us now. I mean, does anybody know how most pen testers break into organizations, or how most hackers break into organizations? Anybody know the statistics on that? It's not APT. It's not 0 days. I'm not going to burn a 0 day in your company. It's like default passwords. It's like SQL injection. It's like stupid stuff that we've known for 10, 20 years. It's the stupid stuff that's killing us in this industry, and it's the basic things that we're trying to fix, but yet we complexify. That's not really a word, but I made it up. The entire situation. We continue to add more and more things that make it even more complex, and we don't even sit there and we don't focus on the basic stuff. And so the one-year challenge is just a reboot to say, listen, I'm going to stop doing something for a year, and I'm going to focus on the basics because that's what I really need to focus myself on, and not invest in something else. So the one-year challenge is interesting. I've seen it work for a lot of companies, but that's kind of step 2 of not doing one thing. Don't buy anything. So consider it. And so I talked about the basics, right? And the basics are exactly what's killing us. And we're in the industry, and this is kind of our own creation. This is what we've kind of done over a span of, I guess, a period of about 5 to 10 years. But we've made everything so complex that we don't even understand it. Does anybody have a risk management program? And in that risk management program, are there like risk equations? Risk equations to me are like the funniest thing ever. We have to have a prioritization of risk, but they're the funniest thing ever because I have no idea what my likelihood is of something happening. Do I know that someone from China is going to hack me at 2 o'clock in the morning from a 0 day or a spearfish? I have no idea. It can happen anytime. So we have these things, and when you know a security program's failing, like just completely failing, is when it takes you 4 or 5 months to fix a critical exposure. But that's the type of things that we're dealing with right now. That's how long it takes us to fix these type of things in most industries. So we've gotten more, process, more things like that. But if you focus on the basics, and the way I like to categorize basics is making things simple. Simple is really easy for me because I don't understand a lot of complex things. I mean, I guess I kind of do with SED and stuff like that, but I'm not a smart person when it comes to, I guess, what we consider security today. And so if I look at prioritization, there's 3 things that I would focus on, period, in an organization. These are the 3 things that I would just hit on, and this would be about it. Because there's so much work to do in security, we're never going to be happy and never going to be sufficient in what we're doing. These 3 things, at least, I know I can control in some way, shape, or form. The first is the external presence, which is still your highest likelihood of attack. The second is your user population, which we've already talked about. And the third is just sensitive data. I mean, if you think about it, why are we all here in this room today? Does anybody know why we're all here and why we're in security and why you work at your company? Protect data, right? And ultimately, why are we trying to protect data? Because we don't want to get stolen. Why don't we want it to get stolen? Because we'd be out of business, exactly. So the reason why we're here in security is so that companies can continue to generate revenue, right? Companies want to make money, right? Is there any company here that doesn't want to make money? No? Every once in a while you get one that's like, no, we're a nonprofit. I'm like, okay, well, you still have to make money in a nonprofit, right? To still continue to have the lights on. So, we still want it. The reason why we're here is so that our company can make money. It's not for anything else. At the end of the day, if there wasn't a risk of the company losing money and losing business, we wouldn't have a security team. We wouldn't have people and funding for security. And so at the end of the day, we have to look at what's generating revenue for the company, what those processes are, what the data is, and where that resides at, and protect that. There's no way that we can protect everything. It's just not possible, especially in large organizations. I mean, talking about a company like where I was at, where it's in 77 different countries all over the place, there's no way that I'm ever going to be able to protect that entire company 100%. However, I can say, without a shadow of a doubt, that I can protect these processes, and they have a pretty good assurance that they're going to be protected. Those are the things that we need to protect against, and it's just the sensitive data portions that we really need to focus on. And so if you look at those 3 concepts, those are the 3 things that we really want to fix, and those are the 3 things that we want to do. I talked about this a little bit, but APTs and 0 days are not the main threat right now. I'm sorry. Like, it's what we hear in the media. It's what the buzzwords are. It's what all the companies are trying to sell you. APTs and 0 days are ridiculous. All right? The chances of you getting hit by an APT are extremely minimum. And at the end of the day, they're using some simple things like spear phishing. Like, did anybody read the APT1 Mandiant report? That honestly looked like something from like 1985. Like, it looked like they're using the exact same thing. Like, they just upgraded their operating system. Same technique, same attacks. It's just something like way out of date. I mean, it wasn't something sophisticated. It wasn't super elite. It wasn't a major hacker. It was something that anybody could do. And that's the thing. We're not fighting the 0 days yet. We're not even close to fighting the 0 days yet. We're not even beginning to tap that surface at all yet. we're still focusing on that small stuff, the small stuff that makes it easy for us to break in. And I'll get into that in a second, but if you're not doing the basics, your entire program is going to crumble underneath you, no question about it. Monitoring detection is a fun one, and I talked about this a little bit, but there's so much information happening every day. How do you even begin to sift through it? And I actually am an advocate of a thing like a SIM, all right? So I might be kind of like anti-product, but I think the concept of a SIM is a good thing. Some way to consolidate all of your information in an organization into one central place that you can then start to look at things in a certain way. Now, the way that monitoring and detection should work is you should look at how attackers break into a company, right? So you should see, hey, most attackers follow this methodology. It uses this type of pattern. We can start to look at certain things and patterns in our infrastructure, in our organization, to see if we've been compromised, i.e. machines beaconing out on machines that they shouldn't, or port scans just as a basic thing. And it's just simple stuff like that. Like when I was at the Fortune 1000 company, the way we had it is we had all of our web applications, all of our firewalls, all of our switches, everything, all tying into our SIM, right? And just stupid things that make complete sense eliminate so much noise. Like, for example, what does every attacker do as they're trying to break a perimeter? It's the first thing that they typically do. Port scan, right? That's like the most simplest thing, right? Just a port scan, right? Now, if you have your external perimeter baseline, you say, okay, I only allow 80, 443, 25, and 53. Those are the only 4 ports that I will allow on my outside perimeter. If anybody touches me on those, not physically touch me, but someone touches me on those other, other than those 4 ports, if we ban them for about 2 months, what happens? You literally cut out about 80% of your noise. So you cut out 80% of your noise just by doing something stupid and simple like that. And now you're only focusing on 20% of what's really out there. Makes it a lot more manageable to do. Just simple things like that are easy concepts that we're not doing. I mean, if I block a port scan from an attacker, yes, I can use Tor exit nodes to start looking at other things. It becomes much more complex, and at that point in time, I'm like, I really don't want to deal with it. And most of us are lazy. So simple things like that allow us to be able to detect it. Now, if you start putting in things like, and web application firewalls aren't necessarily a bad thing, tie them into your SIM. If you see a threshold hit on web application firewalls, automatically block them. Because it's going to take them a while to get around the encoding or whatever type of preventive measures they have in there. Simple things like that, stop it. In fact, there's a funny story. We were all in a meeting, and our phones start going off, and there's like 4 of us in this room, and our phones start going off. And my ringtone, if it comes from a certain email address, is something different. It's what we call the what's the political term? Oh crap, siren. So we all of us are getting the oh crap siren, and we start looking at it, and we started having an attack on our main website. And an attacker was trying to come in through SQL injection and being very persistent, using some pretty sophisticated attacks. And our SIM, and the way that we had it set up, would automatically geographically find out where that person's at and then send that as part of the alert that we had. And it happened to be a Panera Bread, which is a chain of restaurants in the United States that was right down the road from us. So we're like, oh man! So we all get in a car, like running to our car. We get in the car and we're driving down to this Panera Bread, and we have no idea what we're going to do when we see this guy. I mean, it's just like we'd be like, that's him. No, I have no idea, but we're going down there, or we're going to beat him up. I don't know, either way. But we get down there, and by the time we got there, he got spoofed because we had already blacklisted him. But one of the guys that I knew worked at Panera, and we were able to get the video surveillance of the guy coming into the actual place itself, and then we gave that to the cyber warfare team. They knew exactly who it was and picked him up. So kind of a cool way of monitoring detection where it actually worked. Obviously, a completely different use case for most people, but pretty funny. Step 5 is penetration testing. Now, penetration testing is obviously I'm a little bit biased on my side of the house because that's what I do for a living. However, penetration testing today sucks. It's like the worst it's ever been, I think, in the history of penetration tests. And the reason being is we've over-commoditized what a penetration test is supposed to be. We rely completely on tools. So anybody ever got a pen test that's more than 50 pages? A few people? Yeah? Anybody actually read through those? Man, you guys are a lot better than me. I stop at about page 30. But things that that companies do for penetration tests are basically just running vulnerability scans, right? So they run a Nessus or a Qualys or a Nexpose or something like that, and then from there they find whatever exploits in Metasploit, or they go to ExploitDB and they find what exploits on there and then they try to exploit it. That's not a penetration test, folks. Not at all. Do I really care that I have SSL v2 or my cookies don't have the secure flag on them? Who cares? Is someone going to do a downgrade attack on SSL v2 in a Starbucks? Is that really what my primary concern is right now? No way. I have a lot more other issues to deal with than SSL v2 or my secure flags not set on the cookie. And what penetration tests are supposed to be and what they're supposed to be designed to is to simulate an attack, what an actual attack looks like. Is an attacker going to sit there and start blasting Nessus on you if he wants to get into your organization? No. No way. And so what a penetration test can do is three things that are most important. One is your technical finding, sure, right? Hey, you have SQL injection or whatever. But most importantly, how well did your incident response team detect those attacks and what stage? Can we improve it so they detect it earlier on? Can we find out that in this stage we can just enhance some of our controls a little bit so that we can detect that attack at a very early stage and prevent it from even happening? So that's one thing. Two things. The third thing is where do we have fundamental flaws in our security program? And a penetration test can do that better than a risk assessment because it's actually there. We can say that this process here works and it's great. However, when we test it, we found deviations. Like, hey, I can get in through, you might have an awesome SDLC and you're doing security really well and it's injected into the software development lifecycle and you have source code analysis and you're doing all this testing. However, when we buy third-party apps, they're horrible. So we need to look at our third-party vendor risk management program and say, this is what we need to focus on, this is what we need to fix, and this is what we need to do. And at the end of the day, that's going to help you build and strengthen a lot of things that you do out there to really start to proactively go at it. And so that's a penetration test versus what we see today, the commoditization of automation. It's the same thing we're running into technology. It's like, hey, we're going to put this box in. And let me ask you a question. Does anybody here have enough funding for their security program? No? Not one? Okay. Does anybody have enough people for the security program? No? No one? Right? So we don't have enough money, right? We don't have enough people. So why in heck would we go buy another piece of technology that introduces more complexity that we have to staff for, that we can't get staffing for, and it just sits there? And then we go and we buy the next piece of technology, and we implement it, and we sit there and wait, and we have no people to staff it, and we configure it maybe for like 6 months, and then we move on to the next one. It doesn't make any sense of how we're moving forward with it. So my recommendation to you is step away for a week. Just take a week off of work, and obviously just, you want to get that approved first. You just don't want to go take a week off of work because Dave said so. But take a week off of work and think about what you can do to go back to being basic, the simple stuff. And there's a book that I recommend if you're interested. It's called Rework. It's like my favorite book that I've ever read in my entire life. Like I read it once a month just to remind me of what I'm doing. And it's a completely different concept of everything. It's like basically everything that you're taught right now, just take it and crumble it up and throw it away and then read that and do that. It's like getting rid of 3-year projections and 3-year plans because they just don't work. Things change so much in a 3-year period. It's just a really good book to do and to understand. And it's not technical in nature. It's written by the guys at 37 Signals. They ended up writing Ruby on Rails. But it's not a technology book. It's basically like a business book, but how you need to think about it. It's really neat. So go somewhere remote, no cell phone, and think about how you can simplify security. I think in security a lot of times we sit there and we get over polluted with a lot of the fires that happen every single day. So we become very reactive, right? We have this fire, this fire, this fire, this fire, these things we have to do. And we don't literally focus on things that are more strategy related. And that's what we need to do. Complexity is what's killing us. I mean, over complex risk equations and formulas, all of this stuff for compliance. I mean, does anybody know how much regulated data really makes a company? Like let's just say PCI, for example, and cardholder data. I guess unless you're in retail. How much does cardholder data typically make as part of our business as far as actual revenue for our company? It's usually really small, a small percentage of our overall business. Unless, again, you're in like retail or something like that. And so we're focusing our efforts on PCI where the rest of it is really not anywhere else. Lastly, commit to this. It's easy for me to talk up here and kind of preach about it, and then you're like, oh, hey, that's cool, and then you go back to the same routines that you do every single day. But if you go and you change something and you make it a little bit different, you just focus on the basic stuff, at the end of the day, it's going to make your program a lot better and make things actually be more difficult for me to break in, which right now, guys, I mean, it's funny. If I look back at me 10 years ago versus me today, it's like the exact same thing. Like nothing's really changed as far as how I attack systems. Nothing's really changed as far as how I go about it. It's become easier, actually. Like the tools that are out there now, they're just like cheating. Anybody ever used a tool called Responder? Anybody ever seen Responder? If you get a chance, check it out. It's made by Spider Labs. And what's awesome about it's like literally cheating. You plug into the network, you put in you just type in Python Responder and an IP address, and it's a race condition. So it sits there and it tries to be a authenticating server prior to any other authenticating server. And it just starts sending you NTLM challenge responses. Like you just start getting a flow of user accounts and passwords in. It's ridiculous. Like that stuff has just made it so much easier for us as attackers to break into things. And I mean, just like, does anybody know about the group policy hack? Anybody know about the group policy hack at all? Like so funny story real quick, if you don't. So anybody set their administrator passwords or any service passwords or any accounts whatsoever through Active Directory or through group policy, like local accounts? So like the local admin account that you have in your machines, you set any of those through group policy? So you can kind of centralize it and make them all kind of the same. So most companies do. And what happened is when you log into a machine, just like you type Control-Delete and you log in and your users log in, it goes to a sysfile share, which it pulls down all of your group policy, right? And you have to be authenticated user to do this. So it goes in and pulls all the group policy stuff down. And inside of that group policy structure in those folders is a file called groups.xml. And inside that groups.xml folder is what we call a kpassword variable. And in that kpassword variable is an encrypted string. An encrypted string is 128 AES, which is secure, right? AES is a good standard, looks good. It's an encrypted string of your administrator password. The problem is Microsoft accidentally posted the static keys on TechNet for the entire world. So you can go and you can decrypt them automatically in any company you want to if you set them through group policy. There's actually a great module in Metasploit. It's called GPP. If you haven't seen it, just show it to you real quick. I don't have Metasploit open, but I'll show it to you real quick. It's basically just run, post, Windows. I'm going to say it's gather, and then GPP. I think there's one more thing in there. But when you run that command right there, it'll automatically, if you have an interpreter shell, it'll automatically query all the domains that are in that user list. It'll go and pull that groups.xml file from all the sysfile shares, and it'll decrypt it to you and give you the clear text passwords real time. So it's stupid simple, but super easy. And anybody mess with like Windows Credential Editor or anything like that? Just a real easy way of getting clear text passwords in memory. So if anybody logs into a machine interactively, you can just extract all the clear text passwords from LSASS from an undocumented feature. So it's super easy now. It's getting easier and easier for us every single day. So that's not supposed to happen. Here we go. So I guess at the end of the day, my message to you is, I'm supposed to go all the way to there. My message to you guys is essentially getting back to being basic and being simple. That's the message of this whole thing. If you go simple, you're fine. All right, if you go overly complex, you're not going to be fine, and we're still going to hack you in any way, shape, or form. Any questions? All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.